Okay,
Yeah.
we are live.
Okay. All right.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the African Young Leaders Foundation Youth Dialogue series that we always hold every second Sunday of the month. My name is Mary Joyce Takali, the Deputy Executive Secretary, as usual, your host. And it's a pleasure to have you tonight as we have this important conversation. Our theme tonight is the role of youth in promoting accountability and social trust. But before I put that into perspective, I would like to invite our speakers to introduce themselves, tell us about themselves and what they do, because we know that they have this amazing work that they are doing in their countries and in their communities, and that is why they are on this dialogue. So in no particular order, today we have three speakers. We have Mr. Mishek Cheleka from Zambia, we have Mr. Makonrad Jawea from Cameroon, and then we have Miss Jacqueline Vengesai. So I would like to welcome our speakers to come and tell us a few words before we can move on. So Mr. McConrad, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Mary Joyce, and hello to everyone watching us live. I am so excited to join you all this evening. This is my first time uh, being present in such a live session like this. My name is Mark Conrad Jawia. I am from Cameroon. I am a medical laboratory scientist, and I'm a personnel. We keep on with several activities in the community. I also serve as the president of the Cameroon One Health Access Network. It is my pleasure to join you all this evening, and I'm looking forward to an insightful and engaging communication. In addition to that, I also hold several accolades, uh, a scientific award winner back then in 2021, uh, recognized in public health intervention as a specialty, especially in non-communicable diseases. Also, I extend my support towards improving rural communities, especially on accessibility to affordable and accessible health quality for all in regards to the universal health coverage. So my work focus mainly on building a resilient health system for communities, especially the rural communities, where they have a lot of challenges to accessing health. And as time goes, I and my team and I keep on with our duties and responsibilities to provide health accessibility for the population who cannot manageably afford. Once again, it is my pleasure joining you, and thanks very much for the opportunity, Madam Merit Joyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. McConrad from Cameroon. It's really a pleasure to have you here. You are a man of many accolades. You are a man of valor. And we know that your being here is very timely. We are going to learn a lot of things from you. And in the next, I would like to invite Mr. Cheleka, who has been on the dialogue several times. It's always an honor to have him and invite him over and over again. Mr. Cheleka, kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Mary. I think today I've tried by all means to just overcome my fear of turning on the camera, so that maybe people can attach their face to the voice. I'm excited to be back on this dialogue forum platform for the series of different insightful conversations this evening. It's just always insightful and humbling to just feature and share the little knowledge that I have. So my name is Mishek Cheleka from a beautiful place called Zambia, and I'm in the eastern part of Zambia in a place called Pata. So it's actually raining right now. We are in the rainy season, so I hope that it doesn't affect our conversation. But then I come from an organization called Lizu Community Network, where we only do two things. We promote good governance and also digital literacy for women, children, and youth in various communities, as it were. So thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to just learn from other speakers. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sheleka. Because I've been seeing you on LinkedIn posting about good governance, I felt like you were the right person to be speaking about our theme for today. So like I said, thank you so much, our speakers. You're very welcome. Please feel at AYLF. And we would like to welcome everyone who is viewing us from YouTube. Thank you so much. We would request you to put a comment or put a like so that you can encourage us. But also, if you have a question, you can ask. We can be able to ask our speakers. So like I introduced, the theme today is the role of youth in promoting accountability and social trust. But to put the theme into perspective, what do we know by accountability? Accountability basically is like demanding transparency, most times from our leaders, and it usually involves refusing to tolerate corruption, but also taking responsibility for one's actions. So it's not only about the government, but it also includes schools, youth organizations, or other organizations, communities, families, even ourselves, because most of these values start with us as individuals. And then if we dissect social trust can be the belief that leaders will act honestly. Because we put them in power, we believe that they will act honestly and for us. And we believe that institutions will be fair and the citizens will treat each other responsibly. Like we said, it starts with the individual. So when social trust is low, people stop cooperating and you will see conflict rising most times. And then at the end, you will see development slowing down. So the responsibility of the young people is what we want to see or hear today. How are young people responsible, and what is the role? How are they responsible, and what role should they play for us to have a fairer society and a more trustworthy society? So this topic is very crucial and timely, like I had said, because accountability is the foundation of leadership and social trust. They usually say that young people are the leaders of tomorrow, but then we are also the leaders of today. And for us to be able to prepare our tomorrow, we need to, because we are going to inherit this present. So we are the leaders of tomorrow. We need to participate, and our choices have to shape our tomorrow. So just to lay the foundation, let's begin by understanding the roots of the problem. Mr. Mishek, I want to start with you by asking if we put this into the bigger picture, because most times you see you can mobilize young people to come and demand for accountability, then you will not see them. Some of them will not even be concerned at all. For example, in Uganda, I think last year, we were organized online on Twitter to have a march to parliament because we were trying to emulate from our Kenyan neighbors what they had done about the finance bill. So there was a lot of mobilization, but when it reached the time of going, we didn't see anyone. Like we saw very, very few people. So to look at that bigger picture, I want to ask that in your view, what do you think that accountability is weak in many African countries? And what role has that youth apathy, the lack of interest, the lack of concern played in the problem? Because we feel like it just puts salt to the problem and it becomes worse.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. I think you've levered into maybe giving a brief preamble of what accountability is, and I think I wouldn't waste much time to just maybe give context to what that is. But then the question that you've asked is a very critical question, Mary, around why do we still see weak accountability in many of our African countries or societies, and the role that really young people need to play in terms of apathy and just them becoming more involved and more engaged in these very important issues. Is that what we need to establish as we begin is that accountability in many African countries remain, weak due to a lot of combinational issues, issues that have to do maybe sometimes with institutional issues that include systematic problems that have been existing for some time. And the major part of it is historical issues that exist around what accountability must look like. The other thing is about the structural, situations that are created deliberately in our communities that sometimes hinder young people from playing a very important role in terms of accountability. But then, if we look at historical perspectives, like if you look at in the olden times when we were all under a particular rule, maybe governed by our colonial masters and so on, who led us into being controlled of our decisions, what we should think, and how we should do our things. What happened is that even after they left, there's still some post-colonial, existing structures that have made it very possible that young people should make sure that they are not part of the processes, being engaged in the things that we do in terms of putting governments, our leaders, the community, public servants into account. So mostly the systems often value, like they determine what people should think. And so the historical part is that, there's that man or that woman in a particular community who thinks that they can't hold a particular leader accountable because they believe that those who are in leadership are their masters. So they wouldn't want to just, hold them accountable because sometimes there are some issues to do with culture. When a young person begins to ask questions, a lot of questions, sometimes they're considered to be so disrespectful because you do not need to ask elders questions and so on. So those are some of the historical aspects. The other thing is about how the media has been used oftentimes to make sure that sometimes even community members not take part in, holding leaders accountable or even playing a part in accountability. So sometimes media is sponsored, sometimes in other aspects, some people even brand like their communities, or if it's the government, for example, it will brand its services such that it looks like they're doing a lot of work, such that young people won't even have a chance to ask questions. But to a larger extent, Mary, is that most governments and most communities, African societies have made significant progress in terms of hiding information that young people need to use to hold them accountable. And that is a very huge problem that we have. So we are very poor when it comes to documenting our stories. We are very poor at documenting our progress. We are very poor at measuring our progress as communities, as Africa, and as countries independently. So you find that in as much as people would want to play a part in in asking right questions, in accountability, you'll find that they will resent themselves because they are not aware of what to ask. So most governments have made sure that they had that information so that people do not ask them, questions. I'll give an example when it comes to Zambia. So we have the access to information law. I believe in Uganda it's been in existence for some time, but I would also want to learn maybe from Ugandans on how that is working, because for us, I feel like we pushed for it too much, and then when it was enacted, I feel like there's lack now of like enforcement on how best do we then to actualize the same thing. How then do we enhance citizens accessing information? So sometimes we might have good laws, good policies that enable, that dictate that citizens must be able to access information, but you find a lot of gatekeepers, those people who've been in offices. There's that grandmother who's been in that office for 70 years. And then you go there and want to ask for a particular information, maybe about the purchase that the government made, or maybe around the public finances that government is spending, or your council or your local community is spending. You find that there will be that gatekeeper who will say, I've been in this office for 20 years, and we don't just give anyone information. Who are you? Where are you coming from? Where are you taking this information? Why do you want to get this information? So those are some of the structural, historical, and institutional weaknesses. Perspective that have contributed into weaknesses. And then in concluding, over my submission, Mary, is that what exists in most of our African countries is not apathy per se. Young people are ready, they are willing to ask right questions. But what is currently existing is that young people are lacking the opportunity, the privilege, the information, the tools, the resources to ask these questions. So they are interested in asking these questions, but most of those who have power have made it possible by all means to hide platforms, to hide opportunities, to make sure that young people are not given the opportunity to ask questions. And that has really contributed into what we are calling as apathy. But it isn't apathy because young people are interested, but it is just being financed, it is being created so that people don't ask questions. Because if people begin to ask questions, Mary, you mentioned in your preamble, there'll be a lot of development because people will be scared. It will strengthen our institutions. It will make sure that our institutions are independent. It will make sure that our people are able to give responses to the queries that people have. But if we have a lot of barriers, the bureaucracy, the gatekeeping and everything that exists, you find that even people become disengaged into conversations, and you won't even know what people are thinking and what they really want their communities to look like. And that creates a very big problem, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that perspective. It's really amazing, because now that we realize that most of the challenges that we face as young people is not necessarily apathy, but your answer highlights that we have structural, some may be cultural, and then we might have systemic challenges that stop us from actually demanding for accountability. And according to Uganda, because you asked the question about access to information, personally, I got to know about that bill, or okay, that policy or law, I think like 2 years ago, because I was trying to follow something in Parliament, and there was this very brave man who was questioning and asked for information from the Ministry of Gender. And that's when I got to know, oh, so it's my right to go and ask for information. So me, what I see in Uganda is that most of us do not know or are not aware of the existence of that law, or even the government, like you said, they gatekeep the information. We do not know that we have to ask for the information. But even if we go and ask for it, someone will try to stop you from accessing the right information. So that's still a challenge in Africa that we need to work on as young people. Now, moving on from the challenges that are stopping us from demanding accountability, I would like to come to you, Mr. Conrad, and ask that how can we as young people practice accountability in our different spheres of life, in our organizations, in our schools, in our families, before demanding it nationally? Because like we said, it starts with us. How can we be able to practice it?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Mary. And once again, good evening to everyone. It is very, very difficult. It's a difficult scenario looking at our youths of today. If we see how the so much intention to become big overnight, to become great overnight, it's really overcoming the way youths really need to build themselves responsibly. And if we have to look at how can we actually achieve this, as it's often said, charity begins at home. And it is the responsibilities of parents, especially, to follow up their children, because when we have careless parents, it is the same effects which will definitely go on with the entire community, because we the youths, we live from homes, we are from various homes from diverse backgrounds, and our knowledge are not same. We have different knowledge settlements, the way we are being trained, the way we are being brought up in our respective homes. So everything starts from the level of the home. Going from the home, you have the institutions where these youths go to school and everything, their peers. And this has so much influence to play, in the sense that if these youths are not guided properly, what do we expect? We expect an environment where we will have so much of stealing, so much of fights, and so many irresponsible youths. Why? Because there is a huge challenge which has not been addressed. So parents have a role to play. The youth themselves have a role to play. When they realize how essential it is to become responsible, because you cannot be accountable when you are not responsible. So you must be responsible before you can be accountable. So this comes with a lot of self-esteem, self-preparedness, and willingness to actually be responsible. It's a question, how then can we, the youth, be responsible? Firstly, we need to take the aspect of how the community influences. Youths most of the times, they move into social media. This is where all these initiatives start coming in, and you see behaviors start changing. Environmental influence, peer pressure, and all the rest coming, which tend to damage and also cause a bad repetition about youths, see, in particular settlements, in countries, and in so much more. So it is a challenge, especially in the century in which we find ourselves. We know what is going on. So many youths indulging into respective irresponsible activities. Why? So as to raise money, so as to raise funds and all the rest that will give them a fast life. As I said, the youths also have a role to play. They have a huge role to play, but they must be able to identify the right way in order for them to have the roadmap which will guide them achieve a successful and also an accountable life. In addition to that, the families still have enormous role to play. When we have families where access to follow up, lack of provision of basic necessities to children, to these youths, it becomes a problem. And they turn up being on the opposite side, which tend to damage our economy. We also have the government have a role to play, provision of job opportunities, provision of activities that will engage youths and build capacities in youths, help youths to discover skills and all the rest. All these are some of the highlights which, if they are not being put in place appropriately, we cannot have youths who can build a resilient community for everyone within the society. So it is in our place to work on ourselves. We must have that self-esteem. Oh, I want to change. I want to be accountable for everything I do. As our first speaker earlier mentioned, sometimes we have it is due to limited access to information and resources. Yes, to some extent, they are limited to certain informations. As I said, social media now is so much flooded with so many things, irrelevant things, and most of the youths tend to put more attention to this irrelevant aspects, and this influences their well-being, their character, their behavior, and it affects also social interactions with elderly ones and other members of the community. So if all this can be addressed, from the level of the family, parents tend to follow up their kids, their children appropriately, and even if there is a high age turn-up, but there is still a need for some responsibilities to be carried out and coordination of these youth. At this level, if the family is able to achieve this successfully, then we can talk about the role of youths now in engaging in international responsibilities, accountabilities, organizations, and all the rest. But this is very difficult because not every leader can lead. Yes, not every leader can lead. We have so many youth non-governmental bodies today, but they are fumbling. Why? Because there is a lack of self-commitment, there's a lack of self-leadership, and a lack of accountability, responsibility. So there is a lot more. Last 2 years, I worked with several bodies here in Cameroon, non-governmental bodies here in Cameroon, and while trying to work more with the community, I later on realized that the people who were actually giving in these efforts initiative were actually the members, not really the person who is leading. So to some extent, we have, especially Africa. Africa has a lot of resources. We have the youths that can empower and bring brilliant initiatives, brilliant innovation, which will change and also uplift our respective systems, our respective disciplines. So we have the strength, but we need to come together as a team to actually realize our resources, realize and invest in capacities so we can have a resilient communities. So as youths, we must give opportunities for them to become responsible, because it will be difficult to be responsible when you don't have some sort of resources that will cause you to, oh, if I have a budget from an organization of 500 million, can I actually be accountable while using these funds? If you have a donation, let's say from the African Union to fund a project which you demanded for, as a youth leader, can you actually be accountable for these funds? It's a question. So how can you be accountable when you yourself as a young leader are not responsible? It becomes a big problem. And that is why we have so many bodies today fumbling, going down because of lack of accountability. Accountability is always a challenge to many bodies. And if we are addressing these facts today, we are pleading that let us all get back to our respective bodies and encourage the importance of practicing accountability. How can we as well secure our data, prepare our information, report statistics and analysis of events, activities? All these are under the threshold, under the trends of accountability. So accountability is very broad. It doesn't just deal with the level of trust, but it goes beyond that. And what other characteristics, other attributes you portray as a youth leader, as a youth in the community that can help the community grow? So it starts from home. From home, it goes to the community. And from the community, it goes worldwide. So a good character, a good behavior as a youth, therefore, we are sure to have a successful economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. McConrad. That was insightful. What I had you emphasize and what touched me was personal responsibility. That you said personal responsibility is key, and self-leadership, that we have to be very deliberate about us changing and becoming better leaders. We cannot ask for accountability if we are not accountable as leaders, which reminded me of during my primary school. We could go to class with one pen, and then by the time you leave in the evening, you have like 10 pens. So, so before we start thinking that corruption is only for those ones above us. We should also question ourselves, the things that we do. We even accept to pay bribes. Sometimes we even ask bribes from people. So like what stood out from your submission is that it really starts with us, the individuals, and then it would go nationally, or we can be able to ask for accountability nationally. Thank you so much. Now, in your submission, I heard you talk about social media, and it caught my eye, which brings me to the next question that I want to ask you, because today much of the youth engagement is online. Like we talked about, most of the young people, you can always mobilize them online. We saw it in Kenya, how they are mobilized quickly online, and we've seen what social media has done. But we know that social media can either make you or it can break you. So here I want to ask you, what role does social media play in building or destroying social trust among young people?
Okay, thank you for this other opportunity. Social media has, firstly, there is a high rate of destroying youths in social media than building youths. Yeah. Why do I say this? If we look at today's evolving world, we realize that the opportunities that are present on social media, youths much ignore and prefer to work alongside with uh, those which are not really promptly beneficial to them. Yes, we understand that there is a global strive of every youth who want to grow, but many of us forget to know that it is important to take on a responsible pathway which will actually yield a good and reasonable community. Social media, as we all know, it's a very, very broad platform. I mean, so many opportunities, so many job offers, and all the rest. Opportunities for you to connect. But I would love to take and answer this question in two different aspects. How does it destroy youth, and how does it build, how does it create opportunities for youth? So I will start with how does this destroy youth. We have platforms, platforms where youths engage. I think we have YouTubes, we have TikToks, all the rest. More especially TikTok. I will talk more especially on TikTok. If we go to TikTok, we see all the threads of what youths keep on doing on TikTok. You see a lady who is doing a kind of video on TikTok. These are some of the negative effects of social media to our youths. It is not beneficial. When you try to ask, they say no, it's trying to boost the account. They want to raise money through these platforms. No, raising funds is not about selling or showing your or advertising your body to the public. It is damaging, not just to you yourself, but to your family as a whole. It is really bad when these things are being posted and they are being seen. It doesn't speak good of our youth. It doesn't speak good of ourselves. What kind of community, what kind of legacy do we want to leave, or do we want to build in the next generation to come? So these platforms don't really give the opportunities for youth to grow themselves, though most youths take this platform of TikTok to educate the public, yes, as well as to strengthen and also sell their publicity, their business, and all the rest. But nevertheless, it has a very bad role to play on youth, because youths don't use this application in the way in which it was created for, but they go on using this application to do what what is not intended for these platforms. And you see several posts, you see several animations and all the rest from different youths, different perspectives. And today, our own personal selves, when we look at those things, we try to imitate them and we practice them in our today's living. So these are some of the disadvantages, are some of the very bad or poor impact social media is creating to our youth today. And some videos, images, information that are being gotten from social media, we take these informations, we put on our environments. It sticks in our brains even more than the useful information we could get from social media. So it is a really big problem, and it's something which youths as a whole need to come together to address. It could be a global conversation where you need to come together to see how we can stay away from such things and better build a community that the next generation will better come to enjoy. Because as we continue to live, we need to know that sustainability is very important. What will they benefit tomorrow if we leave the social media flooded with irresponsible activities? It's a question we need to ask ourselves. So, these are some of the devastating effects social media play to we as youths in today's evolving world. Looking at the level of how it's impactful to youths, we talk about platforms such as LinkedIn, very professional platform, which creates a lot of opportunities. You create connections, you build various partners. It's a platform where you get a lot of opportunities to build yourself. But most youths are not present on these platforms. They rather prefer being on other platforms like TikTok, YouTube to watch videos, just watch videos and fail to engage on useful and very professional platforms such as LinkedIn. So, how do we as youths therefore engage into this? We have seen the demerits and we've seen the merits of social media. Firstly, as youths, we can use the social media platforms, one, to promote our activities. If you have businesses that you need to promote, responsible business that you need to promote, these are platforms you can promote your business. If you have opportunities you wish to share, you can do that. If you wish to search for a job, they are on platforms which you can go in for, inquire, and gain opportunities. These platforms as well provide the opportunities of youths. You could host campaigns, you could host webinars, visual sessions like what we're having currently. These are very impactful sessions that youths need to dwell in and not the other way around. We need more of these initiatives like this coming up, which will continue to build our youths and strengthen our efforts towards contributing to community building and impact. So these platforms could work with doing posters. Is it on the social informations? Is it on health information that will help the public and the community? Yes, these are all the things we need as youth to put in the social media platforms so as to educate the public, so as to create awareness about important and useful informations that will guide them and also prevent certain circumstances ahead of their way. We know very much that youths have a great role to play as well in educating themselves as they keep on strengthening their engagement. But we know that we hold tomorrow's future, but we need to engage actively in building a resilient future for everyone. So it is really a very sad thing to say that about close to 75% of our youth today are not even aware of the so many opportunities and platforms. And you see, even if some are aware, but they don't go into these opportunities, they prefer to stay back and restrain themselves, feel comfortable on where they are at the moment. But advancement is always necessary. You need to keep updating yourself with informations. Is it on Google? Is it on several platforms? You need to keep updating yourself on informations. So all these are just some of the important highlights social media has a role to play on youth. As well, social media has given a lot of people opportunities, scholarships, and all the rest, which has built them and given them the strength to keep on impacting lives in communities and also helping others to grow as well. So it's a platform for so many opportunities, Thank you very much. Exhaust so much time.
So much, Mr. McConrad. I was caught by what you said about how false information is being spread these days a lot on social media, especially TikTok. Like you can look at something and you're asking yourself, is this real or is this not real? But like you mentioned, fact finding is very crucial to avoid misinformation and disinformation. Sometimes I think that's why our governments even turn off the internet, because during election time there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation. So still in that line, I'll come to you, Mr. Mishek. We usually see trending hashtags about corruption. I'm sure you see them in your country, because in my country I usually see those trending hashtags, especially on Twitter, on corruption, on injustices. So you see them everywhere. But when it comes to really appearing, like I had said in the first time, when it comes really appearing either in community gatherings or even writing petitions or even following up on those leaders, you will see that young people will disappear. Like I gave you an example of what we had in Uganda about the march to parliament, but also even the most recent elections that we had, because Bobby Wine had they had this mantra that they were going to do a protest vote. Like after the elections, they would do something to protest the outcomes of the elections. But then you saw that nobody was saying anything about it. So this raises a question, that because you usually see social media outrage, but when you see like that online outrage, and then when you compare it with the real accountability, those two are very, very different. So you start questioning yourself: is it the same? What would even real accountability look like in the first place? So from your experience, we'd like to know what real accountability looks like, beyond the slogans, beyond the hashtags on social media, or beyond even the activism that we always see online.
All right, thank you so much, Mary, and Comrade McConrad spoke about social media very passionately. So I was just taking note of a few things that he was mentioning, and of course the question around issues to do with how real accountability looks like, and something that we can do beyond social media activism. So maybe for context sake, I would also want to mention that from the organization that I come from, we harness the use of social media in terms of doing our campaigns, in terms of empowering citizens with information, and of course also utilizing it to communicate messages, quicker and faster to with regards to helping individuals reach out to the targeted audiences, especially people like, stakeholders or decision makers and so on. But I'll come to that a little later on how best we can effectively use it to do that, and also share an experience of how we utilize it on our end as Zambia and as Lizu Community Network. But then, how does social accountability look like in practice? So what we need to do right now, Mary, is also trying to be consistent. I feel like there's a lot that we as young people and other young people who are maybe not very young or who are not very old, or everybody in the bracket need to do. We have to be consistent with our messaging in terms of how we demand for accountability. We shouldn't be apologetic, because what we need to understand is the basics of accountability. For example, if the government is making such kind of an amount in a particular year, and then the following year they are doing budgets in Zambia, like we do it in September every year, the last Friday of September, if I'm not mistaken, and then government presents its first budget, and then we begin debates and so on. Uh, that is an opportunity for young people to also engage and consistently demand for what they want to see that budget look like. So real accountability is consistency, because the moment we begin to lag behind, the moment we begin to give up and act a little bit maybe as if we are not interested, the government will keep going, whether you like it or not, whether you're interested or not. So it's about consistency. When we begin to demand for questions around health, when we begin to demand for questions around maybe public sector, around education, around the infrastructure of our communities, public finances, and so on. We need to be consistent in our messaging. We shouldn't shift focus, because what has mostly been happening, it's not only in Africa, even in other countries, you see that the moment young people mobilize themselves, because we are a larger population, Mary, across the world. But I think it's a fact. Young people are the largest right now, because we are below, we are youthful and we are in numbers. So the moment we unite and begin to demand for questions, for answers, for asking right questions from leaders, it shows how we hold the power to decide what the outcome would be. So what mostly governments and the elderly, those in power, have done is to disunite us. It is to cause confusion amongst us. And that now becomes a challenge because we are no longer consistent in our messaging. There you find a comrade who was maybe talking against a particular bill, but because of the constraints in terms of job opportunities, they're also lagging behind. We have comrades who are activists, but we are broke. We don't have money. So what do you do if you're offered a job by the government? You just choose to side with the government and the people who are demanding for accountability. So, but then if we go beyond that, it is about consistency. We need to be consistent in the messaging that we talk about. If we've started with the message of demanding for accountability, let it be consistent for years, for months, until the time when we see that something changes. Of course, we need to also, agree here or to disagree that sometimes advocacy may never change. Sometimes the answers that we ask for may never be given, but that doesn't mean that we should stop. It in fact needs to be giving us the thrill, to continue the power, the vigor to always continue demanding for questions with pride, because it shows the impact that we are making, regardless of whether the outcome is to our side or not. But of course, the other thing, Mary, that we need to also look at is that when we begin to do accountability, advocacy, or activism, it needs to be measured, and that's how proper accountability should look like. It is so sad. I think I've noticed that in most of our African countries, I don't know. I would like to also learn from the other colleagues on this call on whether they have this policy or not, or even from you, Mary, like in terms of measuring, progress in our countries as Africans. I don't know if we have proper mechanisms that we use to measure the impact, the real impact of maybe the policy that is in education. Do we have bodies that exist that track how many kids have started school and so on, and how many have finished? Are they working and so on? Maybe that might even be basic, which might be happening. But do we have like bodies, structured mechanisms that we are utilizing as countries to measure our progress? I'll give you an example. We are with 4 years to Vision 2030. I don't know how many countries are measuring their progress, honestly, and I don't know how far we've gone, and I don't know like how we are doing in line with that. I'll give you an example. In Zambia, we are now should be at 8. We have development plans that are mostly done every year, and now we are on the 8th national development plan. And I would also be curious to learn on how much, progress has been made with regards to realizing the declarations that we've, signed, and the treaties, the conventions that we've ratified, and, all those conversations. So real accountability must be measured. We must be able to track the progress. We must be able to see that things are changing with time. Of course, impact might be very long term, but of course, there's need for some immediate effects that we need to see changing in our communities. When we demand for accountability around issues to do with corruption, are people being arrested? Have we empowered enough people to do the needful when it comes to, calling out issues that are not, uh, i- i- corruption, or should are they empowered within the law to also sanction and so on? That is also the other issue, and which brings me to institutionalize aspects. In Africa, we are good at establishing committees, establishing commissions, establishing bodies that can be very helpful in terms of holding to account the Department of the Executive, perhaps, or maybe even legislature, the MPs themselves, over independent bodies that we establish to offer oversight. But in practice, if we look at the enforcement of those, bodies that we formulate, is another story. And sometimes it is done deliberately because they're not given maybe much resources, so they're unable to perform what they are needed to do. Sometimes it is because of political interference, which is the major issue. Mary, you find that a lot of maybe these commissions sometimes might be, you know, just a gang of cadres, and they are leading it, and you wonder how the criteria was in selection and so on. So sometimes we have a lot of bodies that exist sometimes that can really help us, promote accountability. But the challenge that we have is enforcement, and just trying to see that things in practice happen according to the way they should be happening. So what accountability then looks like in terms of how we should view it is when there's a need for us to say something, we must be able to say it. When there's a need for us to ask questions, there's a need to ask questions, which these two may have been happening. But the biggest challenge that we have is the feedback that we mostly citizens don't get, maybe from government, maybe from public offices, maybe from, individuals that need to be giving this information to the citizens. So, like I said in the introduction, that sometimes these are created deliberately so that citizens are left in the dark, they're confused and they don't know what to do. And if you're confused, you don't know whether you are making a right or wrong decision. You just make it there and then because maybe it's out of impulse or so. So we need to also promote access to community public documents, budgets, community budgets of how our local county or council or ward or constituency looks like, how which projects were approved, how many people were contracted to do so, who was contracted, how was the selection criteria, why was this decision made. But of course, if you're a regular mayor citizen like me and you work with that council and ask these questions, you'll be cited for maybe coming from an opposition political party or maybe being financed by other people to just do an investigation and maybe cause problems. And mostly the other thing, Mary, I think we need to empower our civil servants to be as independent as possible. A lot of civil servants are so scared right now. They are afraid to lose their jobs. They are unable to say anything, even if you were to walk into their office today, just asking a simple question, how many kids failed last year at this school? A civil servant will tell you, I'm not the spokesperson for this institution, or maybe I need to ask my boss to answer this question and so on. Simple information that needed to just be in the public lobby there for citizens to access, So those are some of the issues that are currently happening. But the other the other important aspect that citizens need to play in terms of holding leaders accountable, it is the issue to do with auditing. These are social audits, very basic way to do accountability. I've been privileged to work with different organizations in terms of social auditing. And so it is very simple. Even someone who doesn't know how to read, they are able to audit. You just give them the BOQs, you just give them um, information about a particular school. This school needs to have particular number of roofing sheets. It needs to have how many people, how many number of window panes and so on. They just go there with a scorecard and then they check if that is true. If it's on site, if it's not, they write a simple report, maybe with the fellow community members, and then they take it to the relevant authorities to demand for accountability on how their resources are being used. So we need to empower citizens to know that government resources are not government resources. It is citizens' resources because mostly it comes from taxpayers' money. It comes from the resources that the country generates itself through minerals, through partnerships, grants, and so on. And mostly when presidents even borrow, like from IMF and other international bodies, they don't borrow in their name. They say, come in the name of my poor citizens to borrow this money. And when they borrow, they use it with their families. And who is paying back? It is the same poor person who didn't even contribute, who didn't even benefit in any way. So we need to empower citizens to know that it is their resources. It is their duty to also play a part in holding leaders accountable. And lastly, I feel like I need to speak to the social media activism that I talked about. So, like I said in the preamble, social media is playing a very major role, regardless of like what the other comrades spoke about, the disadvantage that it has come with. Of course, we need to acknowledge that. But on our end, we have seen how social media has played a role in terms of reaching out to particular individuals who we want to target, the decision makers themselves, because mostly these are people who are always on social media. They're also trying to jump on it because they want numbers. Like for example, in Zambia, we'll be having elections on the 20th, on the 13th of August this year. So you find that a lot of aspiring candidates are there on social media trying to get numbers, and that is the best point for us to hold them accountable. If they were a part of this government that is existing and they want to stand again in the coming election, it is an opportunity for us to point out of their failures, what they didn't do, their promises, their manifesto, and so on. So that is something that we need to do, and it is something that is easy. But then beyond activism, online activism and social media hashtags and so on. Like you said, Mary, it is not only you who has a challenge in terms of mobilizing young people physically. It is everywhere. And I feel like it's something that has existed for some time because I feel like the best, of not that we're not really the best, but the introduction of community engagement, community mobilization was with transport refunds and t-shirts. So now we have a bigger challenge because we would need to meet those needs that people have set the standards. And with what has happened in terms of the donor space, a lot of donors have pulled out of Africa, pulled out of many countries, and so on. So it is now up to us doing realistically community engagement without those funds, but still want to share this information. But how do we do it? I feel like it is time also for us to reorganize and re-strategize and begin to tell the people of our communities the truth that there's no transport refund. It is us actually doing them a favor in terms of bridging the information gap, which is, of course, not very easy for us to tell them and convince them when it comes to that issue. But of course, beyond that, um, the major thing that we need to do in terms of helping people beyond, hashtags to just begin to have the vigor of going all out and demand for accountability is also helping them realize the power that they have. A lot of young people, a lot of youth right now, we do not know the power that we have, the power that lies in the numbers that we have. So we haven't capitalized on that. So what has happened is that those who see the value that we have that we do not see are capitalizing on it and using it against us. So if we were to mobilize ourselves and just saw it, we would not want this to continue. We want to demand accountability in terms of the way the job market is, in terms of the infrastructure, public finances, and so on, you would see that there will be change. And what we need to do right now, and what has worked in Zambia, is that I've been privileged also to be a part of, designing campaigns and so on, and translating them from the online space to the physical space. We've had campaigns like which was done by Alliance for Community Action, which was called the Yellow Card campaign. We were talking about the corruption that was happening. It really worked because even the stakeholders themselves, responded physically to that. There's the 42 by 42 fire trucks, exorbitant prices were bought, the fire trucks were bought at, and we did that campaign. It came to life and it was given attention. Even up to now, people still talk about it. So what we do not know sometimes is on how, strategically we can just do our campaigns. Sometimes we bring, we bring campaigns at a time when we have a lot of distractions in terms of conversations. Other people are talking about this person's body, others are talking about this person's bill, and so on. So people obviously go to the thing that mostly interests them and so on. So we also need to find a way to balance on how do we utilize existing platforms where people already love this character or love this person, and how they can we utilize their influence to maybe champion this cause. But in conclusion, Mary, is that the major thing that has caused young people from the context of Zambia, and I feel like in other places, it's two things. So in Zambia, we have the Public Order Act, which mostly is a challenge. Even now, people are calling for it when the government was coming into power, the UPND government that is currently there in Zambia. Their part of their manifesto was that they are going to repeal and replace or do away with the Public Order Act, which if I remember well, it only says that gatherings should be for more than three people, if I'm not mistaken. I stand to be corrected on that. If there are any viewers who are watching, they can maybe comment on that. Should be more than three people. It should be a crime, if I'm not mistaken. So meaning that you need to go to the police, get permission, and so on. So that sounds like a law which was done in the colonial times where they didn't want, Africans to meet. But as Africans, why shouldn't we meet? Why should we celebrate each other and so on? So those are some of the laws that have restricted even young people from demanding accountability. So when you call for maybe for a riot, a protest, some people will resent from that because they're scared. They might be arrested, they might be beaten, they will be brutalized, and so on. They'll be abused, especially our women and girls. They are mostly scared of that because of the trend that has been happening in terms of girls. Lastly, in the context again of Zambia, is the laws like the cyber crimes and cyber cybersecurity, cyber crimes, and and the fraud. I've forgotten the action and the acts that we have has that is a very good progressive, law, but to some extent it is being utilized to silence critical voices because it is too vague in its outright. It talks about you shouldn't be, let's say, for example, hate speech. Well, like, what is hate speech? It talks about you shouldn't, defame the president, but what is defaming the president? It talks about a lot of stuff, issues to do with surveillance. It talks about issues to do with monitoring and so on. So those are the challenges. So you find that young people are scared of expressing themselves. Sometimes even online, they'd rather talk about the celebrities' life and so on, rather than them engaging themselves in constructive issues because of, you know, the laws that have existed in our communities. So those are some of the things. But then what we need to do is we still need to go out and speak and demand for accountability, regardless of all these challenges that we have, because if we keep on, letting them be, it will still be coming back to us that we are not doing enough.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Mr. Mishek. I really couldn't stop you because I wanted to hear a lot about what you're saying, and it was interesting and insightful. We've realized from your submission that for us to be able to translate what I called online outrage, but I would change and say it's online activism or online work into real accountability. And one of the major things you said is that we need to be consistent if we are to be able to translate that into real accountability. But also we need independent civil servants, but also independent institutions, because by that we shall be able to have fair outcomes, and then our at least our governments will be accountable to us in that way. And then you mentioned something to do with measuring progress, which is very crucial. And I think in the Ugandan context, it's usually done by the civil society. That's where the civil society holds the government accountable. They measure progress, they do reports, and then they present them to the government. As far as the government's progress is concerned, whatever they are doing, to be able to track that progress to the policies, the laws in place, but also the agreements that the government ratified in different occasions. Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. I would like to welcome Miss Jacqueline, who is finally here with us. Miss Jacqueline, before wasting time, kindly unmute and introduce yourself so we can go to your questions and what you have for us tonight.
Thank you so much, Mary. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Wengesai. I am an disability and youth advocate from Zimbabwe, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. Looking forward to having a productive session.
Thank you so much. So, Miss Jacqueline, did I hear well? What do you do? Like, we would like to hear about your work briefly.
I am a disability and youth advocate in Zimbabwe. I'm the founder of Amani Trust, a nonprofit organization which aims to help children living with disabilities and helping them access education in Zimbabwe. I am also an edtechpreneur. I'm currently working on building accessible systems for children with disabilities to be able to access education. And as well as globally, I work with organizations affiliated with the United Nations as well.
Thank you so much. You're very welcome. We can't wait to hear from you now, because you had network issues, the problems we have in Africa. I think our leaders, we need to hold them accountable to the right to have internet. But in your absence, we talked about why we think accountability in Africa is weak, and this was brought by Mr. Cheleka. And one of the challenges that he expressed as to why accountability in Africa is weak was because the media plays a crucial role, and most times we don't have access to information, but also measuring progress is hard. And the fact that we usually have gatekeepers of information who stop us from receiving the right information that we're supposed to receive, and henceforth demand for accountability. Now, with that in mind, I would like to ask you your very first question this evening, because accountabilities do not stop, demanding for accountability does not stop at government level or demanding it from governments, because it's also about our everyday action in our communities, in our families, and those different aspects of life. So from a community and civil society perspective, I would like to ask you and you help me understand and the viewers what those practical tools that young people can use to hold leaders accountable, even when they don't have financial resources or even when they don't have political power to do so.
Thank you so much for this lovely question. Um, so I think when we talk about young people holding leaders accountable without political power or money, we would often expect to hear the textbook answers of we need to protest and do this and organize this. But I'm just going to be very honest here. In our African context, full transparency, we all know that our governments really do not tolerate protests. And I'm just going to give an example about Zimbabwe because I am from Zimbabwe. Um, Whenever there is a protest, a riot, a strike, or whenever in Zimbabwe, the police are very quick to show up at the scene and shut everything down. People will be beaten, people will be arrested, some people may lose their lives, some people may even disappear. So then the question then becomes what actually works in our reality? And I think in this generation, the greatest tool that we have is social media. Social media is a very powerful tool that has the ability to build and the ability to destroy. It all just depends on how it's used. Because we may not be able to control parliaments, but we can control timelines. And I think when young people coordinate strategically online, across borders, across platforms, we create what we call reputational pressure. And reputational pressure matters a lot. Governments may be able to ignore a small protest, but it becomes very difficult to ignore something that is trending internationally, something that attracts media attention, something that donors and investors begin to ask questions about. And an example of this is we can look at what Women for Change did in South Africa. Women for Change is a non-profit organization that advocates for women's rights in South Africa. And last year, they coordinated a petition for GBV to be declared a national disaster. They also urged everyone to change their profile pictures to purple. And as we can see from Women for Change, what they did was more than just a petition, it was coordinated symbolism because the entire internet turned purple. Everyone was talking about it. Profile pictures were purple. Malls had purple displays. The petition reached far and wide. It got over 1 million signatures, and it really created a conversation that couldn't be ignored. And in the end of it, GBV was indeed declared a national disaster. So that is what we call digital accountability. We also look again at another example at the teenagers in Nepal who overthrew their governments and they organized their movements online because the Nepal government had shut down all forms of social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. They had to use Discord. They coordinated their movements over Discord and they were able to overthrow their government in a week. This just goes to show the true power of social media. And the good thing about social media, it's free and everyone uses it. Secondly, I believe the next most important tool is being informed. Our leaders, excuse me, our leaders, they depend on one simple fact, and that is the fact that citizens do not read. Our citizens do not read, and that is how most of these promises are made by our leaders, and they end up disappearing into thin air. Let me explain what I mean. When our leaders are giving national addresses, they are usually really long and filled with a lot of political jargon that the average citizen doesn't usually understand. And like I said, these national addresses are really long. So most people are rarely ever paying attention to what is being said most of the time. And as a result, people don't really catch what is being said in the national address. Same thing with when annual reports are being published by parliaments. Very few citizens actually take the initiative and the time to go and read those parliamentary records, the annual reports, the statements, and all of that. This is how most promises which are being made by our leaders end up disappearing into thin air because no one is following up to them. And what I really would urge people is to really be informed Because the most powerful way you can hold anyone, whether a leader or anyone, accountable is by quoting them. To say, for example, we can say in your 2025 national address, you said you will provide 500,000 jobs for youth. Currently, in status quo today, youth unemployment remains at 80%. Where is the change? Because when you quote someone directly, it becomes very difficult for them to deny these claims because it is their words. It also holds a lot more weight than just making generic um, emotional claims. So those, I believe, are the two most powerful tools that we can use to hold leaders accountable without political power or money.
Thank you so much, Miss Jacqueline. There's something that you have said that really made me try to laugh a bit, because you said that we need to quote them if they said something and then they are doing otherwise. We need to quote them so that they can eat their words. Thank you so much. And I think what I get from you is that, like you said, we need to be very informed, because information is power and knowledge is power. Now, from what I take from your submission is that accountability has to begin, like we have been emphasizing in the recent conversations with the Mishek and Conrad, that it starts at the local level, it starts at a lower level, it starts at the individual level, it starts at the family level. So it starts with us, basically. And now, building on that, we would need to understand how, because we want to talk about now corruption, how does corruption at local level affect trust between the citizens and institutions? Because we still see corruption at local levels. Corruption is not only at the national level. Like we had said, we used to be in our primary schools, you go with 1 pen and then you come back with 10 pens. But also we see this corruption everywhere. We pay bribes, we accept to pay bribes, but also we also ask for bribes ourselves. So how has that affected trust? Because we're trying to build social trust, and we're trying to see how young people can be able to build social trust as far as that is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I think corruption at the local level has to be the most intimate form of corruption because it's a form of corruption that affects you directly. There's a difference between corruption which happens at the national level and corruption which happens locally because it affects your daily life, your day-to-day managing of life. An example of this is schools adding an additional amount on top of the school fees because they want to build a new school block or they want to buy a bus, but nothing will happen for the next 5 years. It's the roads which are being shut down um for reconstruction, but nothing ever happens for months. It's buildings which are shut down for renovations, but they shut down completely. You see, so this is just corruption which happens and affects a citizen's day-to-day life. And this form of corruption is the most dangerous because as a result, people have lost trust in the institutions which are meant to help them and protect them. We can look at the police. People have lost trust in police generally. And I think this is a problem we have in Africa generally. Because in Zimbabwe, the last person that you would call if you have an emergency is a police officer. Because you could literally be involved in a car accident, nothing will happen. They'll just come, they'll take their statements, but the person who was in the wrong could bribe the police officer and they'll be let loose. Same thing as people are not reporting their abusers anymore because they know that the abusers will be arrested, the abuser will pay a fee, and they'll be released. Same thing as people also, men who are facing abuse in their homes are not going to report these cases because they know that the police will they'll face a lot of judgment from the police officers. So this form of corruption, local level corruption, normalizes corruption in general. Because as you notice, because of this form of corruption, people are now tone deaf and they cast a blind eye to corruption because it's normal. And a big example of this is how people really believe in connections. A lot of people will be talking about how connections will take you farther than education ever will. It's because of corruption. Because in reality, that's not what is supposed to happen. A connection is not supposed to take you further than education, but because of corruption, which has been so normalized, it's the reality that we're currently living. And I think basically people losing trust in the institutions that are meant to help them also is a reason why people are more reluctant to vote. I'm just now linking it to a bigger cause. People don't want to vote because of the belief of all politicians are the same. And this belief comes from the fact that people are used to politicians being corrupt and making fake promises, such that people are just cynical and very bitter, I would say. So yes, the corruption at local level is a very dangerous form of corruption because it creates a ripple effect starting from grassroots level up to national level.
Thank you so much. I think what we realized from your side of conversation is that corruption at the local level is very detrimental because it weakens confidence in leadership. Like I said, we accept to even pay bribes. Actually, you would find people who are supposed to receive, because most times you see there are services that we are supposed to receive as our rights for sure, but then we are forced to pay for them. Basic services, it might be like healthcare or even police help, because these people are here to serve us. But then most times we have to pay extra money just because we want to access those services, which we are supposed to receive for free. So over the time, citizens start or stop trying to trust the institutions, and then sometimes they want to solve problems privately, and then at the end of the day sometimes it might be violently. So this shows that corruption at the local level destroys social trust more than anything else. And thank you so much, Miss Jacqueline. I am still with you because I want to to end it all with you and ask you your last question, because we've talked about corruption at the local level, but we know that demanding for accountability is sometimes not easy, especially for youth. And at the end of the day, we'll end up making mistakes, yes, in the process. So I would like to ask you, what mistakes do youth commonly make when they're trying to demand for accountability, and how can they avoid them?
The biggest mistake that I've seen youth make when trying to demand accountability has to be acting out of anger and letting emotions take over them. Anger is a very much reasonable response, looking at what is currently happening to youth at the moment right now. But then also, if we notice any time and any initiative that was taken up in anger has never ended well. We can look at protests. Most protests start off because of an outrage, but which protest has ever happened which we can say was successful? Because most of the time, people are hurt, people are arrested, some people even die, you know. And when people are protesting, they participate in vandalism and fights. It just becomes a whole thing which is all over the place. So I believe that when we are trying to demand accountability, we need to be level headed. That's the most important thing. Instead of demanding for accountability from a position of emotion, let's use facts. I would say what I would recommend is let us document injustice happening in real time. Take pictures of the clinics which do not have medicine, the potholes on the roads, the broken down buildings, the broken run down schools. Document everything. Document promises which are not fulfilled. Document everything such that when you come with a statement, you have a statement which is informed and a statement based in facts, not a statement which is based on emotion. Because the most powerful movement you can make is a movement that you can make when you're level headed and you're thinking clearly, right? The next mistake that I've seen youth make is youth have a tendency of now making fun of these people that we're trying to hold accountable. An example is, I'm not sure if you've seen the memes which exist of Donald Trump. You know, I believe when we now make fun of the person we are trying to hold accountable, we lose credibility. Because it's a rule of thumb to say the minute you're arguing with someone and you now bring up the way that they look, you've automatically lost that argument. Same thing applies in this context, because if we are now going to start making memes dragging this president, dragging this leader through the mud, what exactly are we trying to show? Because now we look as if we're joking and playing around. This is why we are not taken seriously, because we like take things lightly, you know? And I believe the last mistake that I see youth make is we have a problem of treating serious issues as if they're trends. And I'm just going to make an example of what happened last year in South Africa. Trigger warning, I'm going to give an example of rape. Last year in August, there was this 5-year-old South African girl, her name is Twekwe, who was brutally raped from her way home from school, or either at school, we don't know. But when her story came out, the entire internet was livid. Everyone was in an outrage. People were protesting, people were in the streets, people were talking about it. But, at the end of the day, after like a week of that outrage, people started forgetting about it. But did Joy get the justice that she deserved? No, she didn't. And it's because people make a mistake of confusing virality with impact. Just because something went viral doesn't mean impact was made. Because right now, no one knows where that girl's case ended. No one knows if justice was ever served. And that right there was a slap across the face for Kwekwe and her mother. Because we always say, oh, the system always fails these victims. No, we are the ones who are failing these victims. We are as bad as the system because we lack the consistency to be able to follow things through and through. What we should have done in Toto's situation is people were in an outrage, yes, but people should have demanded the police to act. We needed police statements. We needed court cases. We needed the judge to take everyone to court, the DNA test, DNA matches. We needed all of that to see the case till the end. But because as youth, we lack the consistency needed for real impacts to be made, most of the times justice is not served, which makes us as bad as the perpetrators of injustice, in my opinion. So I believe if we were more consistent and we took things more seriously, we would make much more impact, because we like to think just because something went viral means there was impact. We also like to think just because we started something, it will end somewhere. We don't have that initiative to take something to the end, even when no one is watching. So yeah, that's what I think.
Wow, thank you so much, Miss Jacqueline. It's really, really amazing to hear you point out some of the mistakes. And what I've seen very rampant is the point of insults. Like sometimes when youth are demanding for accountability, it turns into insult. Because we said that most times when the citizens lose trust in institutions, they start to want to solve problems privately or even violently. So most of these will be insults, or sometimes they will even turn into tribal attacks. We've seen that in Uganda. And then people will just be battling instead of having constructive dialogue. So most times you see the message is lost in the due course, in the due process of everything. And instead of asking for accountability or getting real accountability, the message will get lost in translation because we are making those mistakes as young people. And then you talked about something to do with doing or being consistent even when no one is watching, which brings me to the very, very question that I was going to ask Mr. Cheleka, because I wanted to ask him Mr. Cheleka, in your own view, do you think that African young people or African youth are prepared to lead with integrity, or are we producing the same systems that we criticize?
Thank you so much, Mary. I think that is a very difficult question to answer, especially the last part of integrity. Um, but I believe young people are ready to lead. Regardless of the challenges that we are facing in terms of engagement, participation from young people, their zeal to participate, and also the gaps in terms of how they're involved in terms of decision-making positions and so on, leadership positions and other spaces. I feel like young people are ready, even if some spaces we haven't tried them, but I believe we have an opportunity where young people are exposed different best practices that are happening around the globe. Young people have moved from places to places as compared to the back, back in the days where our parents didn't have that opportunity. There are other issues like Jacqueline has just mentioned, a number of them in terms of the opportunities that exist around tech, around the social media platforms, learning from other countries, and so on. And the other aspect is also the education part that we have. I feel like the civic education that currently we have in a number of contexts, people are even challenging its practicality in terms of if it responds to the current problems that we have, you know, and if that is the right direction that we're taking, and let's say if the history mostly that we learn in various schools and the civic education changes, it also contributes to how we perceive civic education. And like in our context of Zambia, the civic education that has been mostly been taught in schools is that people are just encouraged to vote and so on. But sometimes it doesn't go deeper into making them as kids understand on how that is important in terms of holding people accountable. It doesn't go deeper into making it seem like, or rather make it like be an actual truth of what their vote entails and in terms of the outcomes that it comes with. So all those aspects, I feel like now people are a little bit enlightened. Then the other thing I think it's like the opportunity that we also have right now, in terms of the mentorships that exist. There's a lot of programs, international, regional programs that exist that have taught young people on how they can be a part of the leadership that exists in their countries and so on. But then, Mary, there's a very, there's something that really exists that now is a bigger challenge. So we might have a number of, optimistic, very vibrant young people, intelligent, smart, brilliant, and so on. But then there seems to be, and I feel like something that exists that is making them, you know, change who they are. So you might find that there's a young person who is really passionate about leadership. They want to take a particular role in their communities. But you find that there's institutional capture where a youth leader enters into politics but adapts to the power that exists because from the little experience that I've had, like Jacqueline said, we have the theory part that we mostly talk about. Like we are having this conversation. Mostly of it, it's theory of what we can do. But if we look at our actual context as Africa, you realize that we have the realities on the ground that really sometimes make those who we perceive as very good people begin to, shift focus from the goodness that they have into adapting to the system that already exists. So you find that there is institutional capture that happens. You find that this young, vibrant young woman or guy who vied for office, and then when they get to the system, it then changes them. It changes who they are. It changes what they think, what to say at what point, and so on. And sometimes again, it's also the issues to do with tokenism. So you find that there's a very, you know, in Zambia, for someone to win for a position of member of parliament, according to the recent reports by Transparency International, it says that they need to have about 3.5 million. So where do I even get that money as someone who doesn't work, but I only have passion to lead? So at the end of the day, you find that young people join political parties that they do not even want sometimes just to get support. Sometimes they even enter into deals, get into loans, get money from trusted individuals and so on who want some favors in return. So you find that sometimes youth tend to just change who they are because of that, because they are then controlled of what to do with the money that they've gotten from the controllers. The other thing that we talked about is tokenism. So sometimes you find that like there's the call right now that we need young people into parliament, we need young people to decision making positions, we need women and young people in terms of girls taking up leadership and so on. So sometimes that has been used. Young people are put into positions not because they deserve it, not because they have won the election sometimes, not because they have the capacity, but sometimes it is because it's tokenism, like just putting them there so that we see that there's someone, at least there's a youth, there's a woman or there's someone in that position that needs to be there. Then the other thing is around tokenism. So tokenism works in the way that it's a reward. Maybe you're a branch campaign in a community, and then they've won an election. They put you into position not because you deserve it, but they're rewarding you for your work. So that itself changes how young people sometimes can lead with integrity. But lastly, it's about resource constraints, and I think that is the biggest challenge that we have in Africa when it comes to young people. We have vibrant young people who can take up leadership positions with integrity, but they do not have resources. So it's only those who give them resources who control what they should do and at what point. But again, it is also the institutional capture that has taken over into turning our individuals who we entrusted with power and believe in their leadership, and they've just changed because they want to suit what the system demands, and that it's really sad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. We take it from your submission that young people are very ready if they have civic education, if they have access to the right information, but also if they have access to resources. Thank you so much. Now, having known that young people are ready to lead with integrity, Mr. McConrad, I would like to come to you with the last question. And we would like our viewers to understand what personal values we must have as young leaders so that we can be able to develop and become a trusted voice in the society.
All right, thank you once again, Madam Mary Joyce, and thank you to our previous speakers. Young leaders are one of the core personnel when it comes to development as well as transforming societies or communities, because it is believed that young leaders have the strength, they have the initiative, they have the knowledge, they have the intelligence to bring innovations as well as empower communities. But this cannot be achieved without values. Before we have any positive contribution to the economy, he or she who serve as a leader must have values, which we talk of personal values. So just to elaborate, values are just a key aspect of what will characterize you as a leader based on your respective discipline. We have basic values and we have values which are attributed to the leadership category. I talk about leadership category, I talk about governance, organizational governance, because we have values with those who are leading health organizations, values in those who are leading social organizations and all whatnot. So basic values which are expected of every young leader: one, you must be very humble. Without you being humble, you would never gain the knowledge, you would never have people or members who would want to be beside you to work with you. You will never have contributions, or you won't ever listen to people's suggestions. Why? Because you are not a humble leader. So as a leader, you must be one of the most humbled person in the entire organization. Yes, you must, because you being humble gives the opportunity for your members to come up with initiatives that will support the growth and also facilitate and promote the progress of your organization. Secondly, we talk about passion. As a young leader, you must be very passionate about the field in which, or the organization in which you are running. You must be ready to sacrifice, because when you have passion for something, you will sacrifice for it, and you will do everything to ensure that that mission is being achieved. So you must be you must be passionate about serving the public, serving the community, and ensuring that your objectives meet with what the community is facing. Thirdly, we'll talk about responsibility. A leader who is not responsible will always fall into catastrophic challenges. Yes, because one, you don't remember things, you forget a lot, you are careless, you don't document, you don't check up on your members, you don't keep statistics and all the rest. So things are just so haphazard in the organization. You don't even know the names of your members in your organization. You don't have the contacts of most members in your team. So all these are attributes of responsibility. And this particular responsibility goes up to the extent of organizational values. You in your discipline, do you have these values? It is your responsibility to know each and every member in your team, in your organization. It is a responsibility as a leader. Leading this platform must be able to know them and know their strength and how each and everyone can contribute in his or her own way. Another thing I want to talk about is communication. Communication is very important in leadership. If you are a leader and you can't face the population, you can't face the challenges and communicate information appropriately, then you are failed. You need to know that there is no way you can go along without knowing how to communicate as a leader. To some extent, it's not just about communication, it's about how you think and how you respond. Everyone can communicate, but the issue now is what you are communicating, can it be understood? That's the question. Because communication should have three categories. We speak, has it been understood? And can you respond to the information? Three categories. We must know that. So as a leader, you must know how to communicate, the tune in which you communicate, the tone, your facial exposure, even your body language as well counts a lot during your communication with, is it with people, is it with your members, is it with the committee members? The language also have a role to play, because we cannot go to a traditional environment and you are talking a high level English language. How do you expect them to really assimilate the knowledge? So we must be able to communicate wisely, communicate with a lot of efficiency and discipline within everything we see, and ensuring that the information reaches the target audience and is being understood. Then another point I want to talk about is commitment. As a leader, you must be committed. You must be committed to whatever thing you are doing. If you have a project, a 3-week project to run, you must be committed to that project, monitoring the project, evaluating the project, and you should be able to give a report on how the project has gone so far. This has to do with your commitment. So as a leader, you must be committed to leading the team, because once you are so relaxed, things start going down in the organization, and you see members start leaving the group. People don't react to messages in the group, and you are like, what is going on? It's because you, the leader, are not committed. When you are committed, you would go as far beyond checking on the members. Sometimes you even organize field trips with your team members. This encourage them and make them feel that truly we are working towards the same goal and enriching ourselves. Another key aspect I want to talk about is loyalty. As a leader, you must be loyal to stakeholders, you must be loyal to the community, you must be loyal to your members, and any other person. You must be very loyal. You must be the one to serve. Let your members see how you serve before they can follow suit. If you are a leader who is just about sitting in office, folding arms, and just giving commands, ensure you go down to the streets and handle this. No. As a leader, you should be there to do the work. Though most of the times you may not be present, but most of the time you should be there to lead the example and let the members know that we have a leader who knows where we are going to. This encourages them to know more. Another aspect I want to talk about in leadership is about level of understanding. You must have this particular attribute to understand situations. Most of the time, your members may have several challenges in terms of communication, networks, their busy schedules, and all the rest. You must be able to understand that people have respective or individual responsibilities, which maybe at the time, excuse me, maybe at the time you may want them, they may not be available. So you must be able to take that into heart and into consideration. You don't need to be angry that, oh, I sent a message and you've not attended meetings. Try to inquire, what's the problem? Can I help you out? All those things. These are some of the values young leaders need to get. And it's not about having the fame to be, oh, I am the president, oh, I am the chairman, I am the this. No, it's about, are you actually leading? Are you actually doing the work? That's the question. So keeping aside all those titles, the titles are not what justifies what you do in public or what you do with the community. The titles are just there for brands. I call it brands. Why not go into the work? Look at the title and do the work. Let the people see that truly you are serving the population, which is a good attribute about every young leader. And lastly, I would just love to talk lastly about the aspect of time. Time is very crucial, and time is one of the most expensive thing no one can ever buy on earth. Time. As a leader, you must have time. With time, you must be dedicated. That is for sure. So you must be able to put time and be able to make plans that, oh, at this point in time, we have this plan we need to achieve. At this point in time, we have to achieve. So your organization should be organized, because being organized guarantees an organized organization. But when you're not organized, it becomes a problem. So you must have the time to do everything in your organization. You must have your schedule. You must have a personal routine that, oh, on this day, I am supposed to have this meeting with the members to keep on educating them and creating the awareness that, oh, we are working the same shared objectives and the same shared goals. So just to name a few, these are some of the key attributes of young leaders which they need to get. In addition to other organizational values, we talk about in the medical sector, loyalty, extensive loyalty to serve the population, sacrifice, moving under bad weathers, roads, and all the rest. But these are just the basic and global values which leaders need to get. There are many other values which you can go, you will see, but all these values are linked. They all fall under the same scope. So at this point, I guess I have contributed some values which can go a long way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. McConrad. Because our theme tonight was the role of young people in building social trust. And I think one of the things that our speakers have emphasized is personal responsibility. And from what I take from you, the values that we need to cultivate as young people, if we want to be a trusted voice in society, one of them is humility, responsibility, communication, commitment, loyalty, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't want to repeat what you said because it was very elaborate. Thank you so much, Mr. Jawea, for that insightful conversation and submission. Now, we have almost come to the end of this dialogue, and I would like to invite Mr. Cheleka in 30 minutes to give your last words and maybe your call to action.
Thank you so much, Mary. Been a very insightful conversation, listening from Jacqueline, from McConrad, and just learning from their insights and experiences. I feel like we all stand at one balance in terms of our call to action. I feel like it's like like just calling for young people, fellow young people, to just stand for their rights and just be engaged in these civic matters and duties that we all have, and just respect the principles of democracy that aim to enhance our transparency, accountability in the communities that we serve and serve. Thank you so much for inviting me, and hoping that I could be part of another dialogue series as we continue to just try and engage people with various topics and just trying to bridge the gap in terms of information sharing. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. Mr. Conrad Jawea, can we have your last words as we wind up tonight?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Mary. My last words, just wish to encourage every young leader, every youth, that we all have a big contribution to play as far as our economy is concerned. And we must collaborate together. We must build the Africa that we always talk of. As Madam Mary said at her earlier words, that it starts now. It's not about the future, it starts now. So we have a responsibility to be responsible, to be accountable, and build social trust. So once again, it's a pleasure to be amongst you all, and I am looking forward to your shared engagements and open conversations some other time. Thank you very much, and have a good time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Conrad Jawea. And Miss Jacqueline, can we have you with your last words or call to action?
I'd just like to say that seeing that people have lost trust in our leaders, in our society, I think it's up to us as young people to step up and make sure that we are the ones who take the initiative to rebuild trust in the citizens. We need to be the generation that we never had, the leaders that we never had. I think we start showing up, we start being consistent, we start challenging systems. This is definitely possible. And yeah, that's all that's I want to say, basically.
Thank you so much, Miss Jacqueline, for those beautiful words. Now, as we wind up, realize that from the whole conversation that we had with our speakers, realize that demanding for accountability is not about criticizing our leaders, it's not about acting out of anger, but it's also about building character, those values that Mr. Conrad has talked about. It's about taking responsibility, acting with integrity in our spaces. We've seen the challenges that have weakened our demanding for accountability. We've had the tools that we would need. We've had the mistakes that we usually make and how to avoid them. And then lastly, we had about the personal values that we are supposed to cultivate as young leaders if we want to build social trust. The theme has been the role of young people in demanding accountability and also building social trust in Africa. And the challenge or the question that I would love to leave to our viewers who are viewing us from YouTube is that after this conversation, what would you do differently? And that is rhetorical, and that is a question I want to leave with you. So on behalf of African Young Leaders Foundation, I would love to thank our esteemed speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Ms. Jacqueline Vengesai, Mr. Conrad Jawea, and Mr. Meshek Cheleka. Thank you so much for those insightful conversation that we've had, but also thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared with us. And lastly, I would love to thank the viewers from YouTube who are always here to view us, and those who come and view this video after some time. Thank you so much for always